One stroke of King Charles's pen shattered decades of quiet power games and erased Camilla's family from royal destiny forever. But why now, and at what cost? Inside the gilded walls of Buckingham Palace, the air was thick with tension as senior aides scurried down corridors whispering of a closed-door emergency. No one seemed to know what was coming, only that something seismic was about to happen. A handful of trusted royals were summoned to the Queen's gallery under the guise of urgent royal business. But not even they could anticipate the bombshell waiting for them. The chamber was eerily silent as King Charles entered, his expression unreadable, carrying a single sheet of parchment that would redefine royal history. Without ceremony or consultation, he sat, lifted his pen, and with a single, deliberate stroke, signed a decree so shocking that the silence was shattered not by words, but by gasps that rippled across the room. Those who witnessed it stood frozen, eyes darting between the king and the sealed document. It was done. The ink was barely dry when the whispers began. What did he sign? Why? But the answers lay staring back at them from the parchment. Camilla's family's names, her children and grandchildren struck clean from the line of succession, removed entirely from the royal fabric, as though they had never belonged. The weight of what had just happened settled like a storm cloud over everyone present. A senior aide, who had served both Charles and Camilla loyally for years, dropped his notepad, his face pale as he understood the magnitude. Senior royals exchanged glances but said nothing, their silence speaking louder than words. One by one, they nodded, some in quiet approval, others in horror, but no one dared challenge what had just been done. Moments later, even before the room could exhale, news of the decree somehow leaked. Outside the palace gates, journalists were already scrambling, phones buzzing, headlines being drafted at breakneck speed. King Charles removes Camilla's family from royal succession blazed across screens and newsstands. The public reeled in disbelief, confusion, and among some quiet satisfaction. The monarchy, which prided itself on discretion, had instead unleashed a spectacle of betrayal and reckoning in real time. And as the media storm ignited across Britain and beyond, the walls of Buckingham Palace seemed to reverberate with the ghosts of past grudges, old wounds splitting open, and whispers of a betrayal that had been brewing for years. Those who had thought the monarchy had finally settled its inner conflicts were proven devastatingly wrong in a matter of minutes. But to understand why Charles made this ruthless move, we must descend into the hidden palace intrigues and buried grudges that set this drama in motion. For years, Camilla wove a quiet web of influence to bring her children into royal favor, but it was that ambition that would doom them. From the moment she stepped into her role as queen consort, Camilla understood the unspoken rule: presence was power. And so she made her move not through open demands or public declarations, but through subtle, relentless maneuvering. Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopes, her children from a previous life, began appearing at royal events with increasing regularity, always positioned just close enough to suggest belonging, yet far enough to avoid outright scrutiny. At first, their inclusion was tolerated as a nod, perhaps, to the Queen's hard-won place at Charles's side, but over time, it became clear that Camilla intended more than mere acknowledgement. They were given privileged seating at ceremonies that historically reserved such places for the bloodline. Private audiences with foreign dignitaries became routine, their names appearing on guest lists that once bore only Windsor heirs. Even at Windsor itself, Tom and Laura became familiar presences, slipping into corridors and drawing rooms once thought sacred to the sovereign lineage. It was no longer subtle. It was calculated, and the family felt it. Behind the dazzling smiles and stiff royal pageantry, tension began to brew. William and Catherine, protectors of Diana's legacy and fiercely devoted to their own children's future, watched with increasing unease. They saw Tom and Laura not as harmless figures, but as a growing shadow over their children, particularly Charlotte, whose position, though secure in blood, now felt challenged in spirit. In private, Catherine's patience thinned. She confided to close aides that Laura's confident demeanor at official functions felt almost provocative, as if daring someone to object. Even the ever-composed William couldn't mask his discomfort during quiet moments when Camilla's children edged into spaces meant for Diana's descendants. As the palace adjusted to this quiet encroachment, so too did the public. Whispers from the press, once cautious and polite, grew bolder. Commentators questioned how unelected, Non-blood relatives could occupy seats at the heart of a monarchy defined by blood. Opinion columns speculated about favoritism, about whether Camilla's charm had finally crossed the line into open defiance of tradition. Headlines painted Laura as a rival to Charlotte, a woman born of privilege but without rightful claim, yet maneuvering as though destiny had anointed her. Inside the palace walls, aides who had served through generations of monarchy began to exchange glances that spoke volumes. They felt the imbalance, the quiet break from decorum. Some claimed Charlotte herself noticed, her youthful grace overshadowed at times by Laura's confident presence. The more Camilla positioned her children near the throne, the more the palace's ancient heartbeat faltered. And all the while, Charles watched it unfold in silence. He never intervened, never chastised, never encouraged. But each private glance he cast toward William and Charlotte revealed a growing unease about a king torn between loyalty to his wife and loyalty to his blood. Yet he said nothing, choosing instead to let the tension coil tighter with every passing day. But Camilla's ambitions clashed with a force far more powerful than her charm, Diana's ghost, and her haunting final wish. A forgotten letter, sealed for decades, emerged to expose a prophecy so chilling it left even the king in tears. It surfaced not through intent but by accident, unearthed during a quiet reorganization of Queen Elizabeth's private archives, a routine task destined to ignite a royal reckoning. Among the countless papers catalogued by trusted aides and Princess Anne herself was an envelope, faintly marked with Charles's initials and sealed with Diana's unmistakable crest. At first it seemed just another relic of the past, another whisper of a history too heavy to confront. But inside lay words that refused to stay buried, a mother's plea that struck like lightning through the calm of the palace. The letter, written entirely in Diana's elegant hand, was addressed directly to Charles. No formalities, no pretense, just raw emotion poured into ink. She began not with accusations, but with fear for the place her sons and their future children would hold in a monarchy she knew too well could be unkind to outsiders. She begged him to protect William's and Harry's inheritance, not just of title but of legacy, reminding him that the bloodline was more than privilege. It was trust, the fragile connection between crown and people. Her words revealed a foresight that seemed almost supernatural. "Should William have a daughter," she wrote, "she will carry more than our name. She will carry the spirit of the people, the future Diana." This phrase alone silenced the room when Anne read it aloud long before Princess Charlotte was even born. Diana had envisioned her, as though already sensing the battles to come. But the letter did not stop at hope. It darkened into warning. Diana urged Charles to remain vigilant, to never let outsiders, as she called them, dilute the monarchy's lineage. She feared that someone, someday, would try to weave their own family into the fabric of the crown, and she implored Charles to stop it before it began. This was no simple request. It was a command from beyond the grave, a haunting prophecy that now stared him in the face. When Princess Anne finished reading, she could not speak. Those in the room watched as her eyes glistened, and she abruptly excused herself. For nearly an hour, she remained in silence, holding the letter as though it were burning in her hands. When she finally returned, she insisted it be delivered directly to Charles without intermediaries, without delay. She knew what it meant, and she knew who needed to read it. When Charles unfolded the letter in his private quarters, he found himself staring at his greatest failure and his greatest test. Every line cut deeper than the last. He could feel Diana's eyes on him, her voice between the words, reminding him of promises he never kept. Guilt crushed him, and in that moment, he realized he had allowed the very thing she feared to begin. And from that moment, Charles resolved to honor Diana's prophecy, no matter the personal cost. When love and duty collided, Charles chose duty and unleashed a storm that no crown could contain. After nights of restless deliberation, he summoned Princess Anne and Prince William into a secluded chamber deep within Buckingham Palace. Only the three of them would know what was about to happen. No aides were permitted to join, no secretaries, no courtiers. The doors closed, locking out the rest of the world, leaving just them and the silence of centuries pressing in on their shoulders. This was not a discussion, it was a reckoning, and the decision had already crystallized in Charles's mind. He sat at the table, the decree lying before him like a final judgment. Anne stood behind him, stern and unreadable, while William remained seated across from his father, his jaw set in grim acceptance. Both knew what this moment meant not just for the monarchy, but for the family itself. To preserve the bloodline, to honor the prophecy in Diana's haunting letter, Camilla's family would have to be cut away like a diseased branch. Charles's face betrayed nothing, but his hands, resting on the document, revealed a faint tremor, the only sign of the war raging inside him. Even as his fingers tightened around the pen, he hesitated for just a breath. The weight of his choice bore down on him. Memories of Camilla's unwavering loyalty over the years, her quiet strength, her public humiliation in the past, all collided against the words waiting to be signed. But the ghost of Diana loomed larger. Her plea echoed in his mind, "Protect the royal bloodline, protect our children, protect the future, Diana." And so, with a hand that trembled but did not falter, he signed. The ink bled into the page as if it carried his guilt along with it. The decree officially stripped Camilla's descendants of any royal standing, severing their ties to ceremonies, titles, and succession, removing them from history with the precision of a scalpel. The silence in the room after the final stroke of his pen was deafening. Anne finally exhaled and quietly took the document, folding it into a leather portfolio without a word. In the corridors outside, a few trusted aides waited, oblivious to the thunderous decision that had just been made. Only at the very last moment did Charles allow them in, ensuring no whispers escaped until the ink was dry. As the decree was sealed and sent to the royal archives, even the most seasoned staffers felt the shift in the air. Something sacred had been broken, and no one could quite meet each other's eyes. The king believed, in that moment, that he had restored order to a monarchy that had teetered too close to chaos. But while the king believed he had restored order, he had unknowingly awakened a fury that would soon engulf him. She arrived too late, but the sight of the sealed decree broke her spirit and marked the beginning of her vengeance. Camilla had been summoned with urgency, the kind of summons that allows no questions and no hesitation. The message was blunt. The king required her presence immediately at Buckingham Palace. Yet no details were given, no explanation offered, only the kind of terse command that sets the stomach twisting. She obeyed without protest, leaving behind whatever she was doing and making her way to the palace at a pace that betrayed both worry and hope. In her mind, she rehearsed possible reasons, none of them prepared her for what awaited. By the time her heels struck the marble of the palace corridor, the decision was already signed, sealed, and archived. She was minutes too late, a detail that would haunt her for years to come. As she approached the royal chamber, she noticed some strange whispers. Senior aides huddled in corners, their eyes flitting toward her before quickly looking away. There was no customary greeting, no gentle bow, only silence thick enough to cut through. Then, faintly, she heard it. Two aides, careless in their shock, muttered just loud enough for her to catch the words, "It's done." Her family, erased. Camilla froze. The blood drained from her face as she realized what they meant. Every suspicion, every quiet fear she had fought to bury, surged forward at once. Her children, her grandchildren. Stripped from the royal line of succession in her absence, with no chance to plead, no chance to fight. She moved toward the chamber doors with mechanical resolve, her breath uneven, her dignity clinging by a thread. But as she reached them, her body betrayed her. The weight of the betrayal struck so suddenly, so completely, that her knees buckled beneath her. She collapsed outside the royal chamber, her hands clutching the floor, sobs breaking through the composure she had honed over decades. For once, there was no mask to wear, no strength left to summon. In that moment, Camilla was not queen consort. She was a mother who had just watched her family's future obliterated with the sweep of a pen. Those who witnessed it later described her devastation as unlike anything they had seen. A woman who had endured years of public hatred and humiliation, yet never broken now, crumbled at the doorstep of her husband's judgment. Yet inside the chamber, Charles remained cold, unmoving. He did not come out to comfort her, did not speak her name. His silence was louder than any rebuke. For Camilla, grief was a familiar companion, but this grief was different. As she was helped to her feet, the tears began to dry, and what remained in their place was not sorrow, it was rage. That rage soon took shape not as quiet heartbreak, but as a devastating plan for retaliation. Whispers turned into headlines as Camilla's revenge began spilling into the public sphere, one secret at a time. What had started behind closed doors now roared into the open, and the monarchy, so skilled at controlling its image, found itself suddenly and violently exposed. It began with a quiet ripple in the European press, a well-placed article in a French newspaper hinting at private conversations between Camilla and foreign media contacts. The piece claimed she spoke candidly about the king's duplicity and broken promises, describing herself not as a villain but as a betrayed partner forced to protect her children against a machine that would otherwise erase them entirely. Overnight, more outlets joined the frenzy. German and Italian tabloids published stories that painted Charles in an unflattering light, suggesting that his carefully cultivated persona of duty and restraint was little more than a facade hiding a double life. Allegations surfaced about secret meetings, private deals, and unrecorded conversations that raised questions about his integrity and consistency. Though none of the claims were confirmed, the sheer volume of them was enough to shake public confidence. Suddenly, everything about the king, his silences, his decisions, even his devotion to Diana's memory was cast in a harsher, more cynical light. Inside Clarence's house, panic gripped the staff. The quiet dignity of the monarchy shattered as aides raced between rooms, clutching phones and whispering urgent instructions. Crisis teams were hastily assembled to stem the leaks, but every time one rumor was countered, two more appeared. Legal teams worked around the clock drafting cease and desist letters, but the damage was already done. Camilla's campaign, silent in its orchestration but deafening in its impact, had caught them unprepared. As headlines blared across Europe and beyond, Camilla herself remained quiet, but not absent. She sent a single, cryptic message to her children: "They won't erase us." That simple sentence, reportedly sent from her private line late at night, became a rallying cry not just for Tom and Laura, but for every observer who now began questioning whether the monarchy had gone too far in protecting its bloodline at the expense of compassion. Meanwhile, the royal family's polished facade began to crack under the weight of scrutiny. Longtime supporters turned hesitant. Allies grew quiet. The carefully rehearsed narrative of unity fractured as speculation spiraled out of control. Even loyalists wondered, if the king could erase Camilla's family so easily, what else might he sacrifice in the name of duty? And as the world watched the royal family unravel, one figure quietly rose to embody its fragile hope. Amid the wreckage of betrayal and vengeance, one child's quiet strength began to redefine what it meant to be royal. As the monarchy staggered under Camilla's retaliation and the public's growing discontent, a surprising figure emerged from the chaos, not as a fighter, but as a symbol of resilience and grace. Princess Charlotte, barely old enough to understand the weight of her lineage, became the focus of a nation desperate to believe in something pure again. Newspapers and commentators, fatigued by the darkness swirling around the palace, began calling her the future Diana, a title that ignited hearts across the world. Every photograph of her, every careful smile, every composed wave seemed to carry with it the echo of Diana's legacy, a reminder of a woman who had once transformed the monarchy through compassion and defiance. People saw in Charlotte the same spirit they'd adored in her grandmother: strength wrapped in innocence, dignity tempered with humanity. While Camilla's grandchildren quietly receded from view, eclipsed by the fury of their mother's downfall, Charlotte's star only rose higher. Her presence became a quiet rebellion against everything Camilla's campaign represented, as an unspoken declaration that lineage and love still mattered more than ambition. But with her rising prominence came a responsibility she never asked for. William and Catherine, now more protective than ever, stepped forward to shield her from the relentless storm. They orchestrated her appearances carefully, balancing her growing role with the need to preserve her childhood. Yet they could not deny what was happening. Wherever Charlotte went, the mood lifted, the narrative softened. People cheered louder for her than for anyone else in the family, and in her, royal watchers saw not just a child but the embodiment of the monarchy's potential to heal. For Charles, however, Charlotte became both redemption and burden. He watched her closely during family gatherings, noting how effortlessly she drew people to her, how instinctively she commanded affection. She was proof that his decision to remove Camilla's family had meaning, that Diana's prophecy had not been ignored. but she was also a constant reminder of everything he had sacrificed to get here. Each time he looked at her, he saw not only the future but also the cost of Camilla's fury, the palace's fracture, the heavy silence between him and the woman who once stood at his side. Yet the people did not care for the shadows beneath the crown. They saw only Charlotte, and in her eyes they found hope for a monarchy battered but not broken. She became the quiet center of a storm she did not create, carrying the weight of a fractured family with a grace far beyond her years. But even as the next generation rises, the scars of the past still bleed beneath the crown's glittering surface. With Camilla vanished, the monarchy fractured, and public opinion divided. Charles is left to confront the chilling cost of his choice. In the weeks that followed the decree, Camilla retreated into silence. A silence that was not submission, but calculation. She disappeared from public life entirely, refusing all engagements, declining all appearances, leaving the world to wonder what she was planning behind closed doors. Her absence became its own statement, a quiet defiance that unnerved the palace as much as her anger ever had. Those closest to her hinted she was biding her time, choosing her moment with the precision of someone who knew the stakes better than anyone. Outside the palace walls, her children did not remain still. Rumors swirled of legal consultations, of quiet meetings with solicitors and advisors who whispered of challenging the decree itself. Though no official statements were made, the possibility that Camilla's family might drag the crown into court sent tremors through the monarchy's foundation. For the first time in decades, the royal family felt vulnerable not to foreign enemies or political pressures, but to its own internal wars spilling into the open. Charles, though stoic in the few public appearances he managed to keep, began to crack in private. Those closest to him noted the change. His silences became longer, his temper shorter. In the stillness of his private quarters, he would sit alone for hours, staring into the middle distance, the weight of what he'd done settling heavily on his shoulders. His resolve had carried him through the signing of the decree. But now, he was left only with the echoes of its consequences and the ghost of a woman who, even in death, commanded his conscience. In the vacuum left by Camilla's retreat, William and Catherine stepped forward decisively. They began shaping a new narrative, one that emphasized family unity, duty, and the rising generation. Together they crafted a message of renewal, presenting Charlotte as the future Diana and anchoring themselves as the monarchy's steady heart. It was a bold maneuver, and it worked at least for some. But the nation was no longer united. Instead, it split painfully down the middle. Some celebrated Charles's decision as a return to heritage and honor, a reaffirmation of the bloodline Diana had fought for. Others wept for Camilla's ousted family, seeing them as collateral damage in a cruel power play. Newspapers, commentators, and the public at large chose sides, and the divide became impossible to ignore. And then, in one quiet moment late at night, Charles whispered to a trusted aide what he could never say aloud on the balcony. 4 words that carried the weight of every sacrifice, every betrayal, every haunting memory: Diana always wins. And so, the monarchy lurches forward bruised, haunted, yet unbroken, as the world waits to see if the crown can survive the storm it unleashed upon itself. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.